She moved through the restaurant with quiet efficiency, carrying plates stacked high with food, her steps careful to avoid the scattered crumbs on the worn wooden floor. The small bell above the door jingled constantly as new customers arrived, and she smiled politely at each one, though her mind was elsewhere. For most people, she was just another waitress doing her job, moving through the motions of taking orders and delivering meals. But there was a part of her that felt different, something waiting to be noticed, something she had kept hidden for too long. The restaurant was a cozy place, with mismatched tables and chairs that had seen better days. In one corner, there was an old piano, a beautiful instrument with keys that had lost some of their shine, but still held a charm that drew the eye. Most people ignored it, seeing it as decoration, but she had always been drawn to it. When the restaurant was quiet, she would sometimes sneak over during breaks and press the keys softly, letting her fingers remember the notes she had played in secret countless times before. Music was her escape, the part of herself she didn't show anyone. Today, though, she barely had a moment to think. The lunch crowd was unusually busy, with families and couples filling the tables. She moved quickly, taking orders, carrying drinks, and apologizing for the wait with a practiced smile. Her back ached from standing, and her feet were sore, but she didn't complain. She liked working here even if it meant long hours because it gave her a sense of routine, a place to belong. But her heart ached for something more, something she had only allowed herself to dream about in the quiet hours after her shift. The manager, a kind man with a nervous habit of tugging at his collar, was moving between tables, checking on orders and trying to keep everything running smoothly. She noticed the tension in his movements, the way his brow furrowed every time he glanced at the corner piano. He seemed to be searching for something, and she wondered what it could be. Then she overheard him talking quietly to one of the waiters. "The pianist isn't coming today," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We need someone to fill in, or the customers will notice. Can anyone play?" She froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. She had played the piano her whole life, though mostly in secret. People knew her as a waitress, a friendly face who took their orders and remembered their usual drinks. But no one knew about the music that flowed from her fingers when no one was watching. Her mind raced. Should she speak up? Could she? The thought of sitting at that piano in front of a full restaurant made her stomach twist with nerves. She glanced around, noticing the curious eyes of the staff and a few regular customers who seemed to sense that something unusual was about to happen. Her hands itched to play, to let the music fill the space and tell the story she had kept locked inside her for so long. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, and walked toward the manager. "I can do it," she said softly, almost as if she didn't believe it herself. The manager looked at her in surprise, a mixture of relief and doubt in his eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I mean, anyone can try, but—" She nodded, her resolve firming. "I'll play. Just give me a moment." He hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled and stepped back, giving her the space she needed. She walked over to the piano, feeling the curious gazes of the customers on her back. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the cover and pressed her fingers lightly against the keys. The sound was familiar and comforting, a small spark of courage igniting in her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the hours she had spent practicing in her tiny apartment, the late nights when the world was silent and only she and the piano existed. Music had always been her companion, a friend who understood her without words. And now, here she was, about to share it with people who had no idea she had this side to her. The first note she played was soft, almost hesitant, but it filled the room in a way that made people stop talking. Conversations paused, and the clatter of dishes seemed to fade. She opened her eyes and saw the surprised expressions of the customers. They had expected background music, perhaps a recorded track or a simple melody, but not this. Her fingers moved carefully at first, finding the rhythm, letting the notes settle in the air, and with each passing second, her confidence grew. The waitress allowed herself a small smile as she continued, the music flowing more naturally now. It was a song she had composed herself, something that carried the emotions she had tucked away for years. She let herself feel the music fully, her heart beating in time with the melody. The restaurant, once just a place of work, had transformed into a stage where she could finally be seen for who she truly was. As the notes spread through the room, she noticed the subtle changes in the people around her. Some leaned forward, captivated by the sound. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Even the manager, usually so composed and busy, seemed caught in the spell of her playing. She felt a connection with everyone present, a silent conversation through the language of music. For a moment, all her fears and doubts disappeared. There was no longer a nervous waitress, no longer a crowded restaurant with impatient customers. There was only the piano, the music, and the unspoken understanding that she had something worth sharing. Each chord she struck seemed to tell a piece of her story, her struggles, her dreams, her quiet hope for something more. And as she played, she realized that this moment, small and unexpected as it was, might be the beginning of something she had always wished for but never dared to imagine. The restaurant continued to buzz with life, but now there was a different energy in the air. People were listening, fully present, caught in the beauty of the music she poured into every note. She felt a thrill run through her, a mix of joy and nervousness, knowing that what she was doing was extraordinary, at least for this room, at least for this moment. She didn't rush, didn't try to impress. She let the music guide her, letting her fingers move as they had countless times before in the solitude of her apartment. The melody carried her through memories of her childhood, of small victories and quiet disappointments, of nights spent dreaming of sharing her music with the world. And as she continued, she felt a growing sense of courage. Perhaps this was more than a moment. Perhaps it was the first step toward a life where she could embrace every part of herself. By the time she played the final few notes of the piece, the restaurant seemed transformed. There was a hush, a collective pause as people absorbed what they had just heard. She lifted her hands from the keys, her breath catching slightly, and looked up. The faces around her were filled with surprise, admiration, and something she hadn't expected, awe. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just as a waitress carrying plates, but as someone with a talent that could touch others. The manager approached, his eyes wide and a smile breaking across his face. That was incredible, he said. I didn't know you could play like that. She shrugged, a bit shy, but her smile was genuine. I play sometimes. No one usually hears it. A few customers clapped softly, others whispered words of praise, and a warm sense of accomplishment settled over her. She had taken a risk, stepped into the unknown, and found that her music could reach people in ways she had only dreamed of. And in that moment, she realized that sometimes, all it took was one small act of courage to change everything, even if only for a few minutes in a busy little restaurant. She sat back down at the piano after the brief applause, her hands still hovering above the keys, unsure whether to continue or let the moment end. The restaurant had grown quiet again, almost as if the music had paused life itself. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her, and instead of feeling nervous, a strange calm washed over her. It was as if the piano had become a safe place, a sanctuary where she could express herself without words. She took a deep breath and let her fingers drift across the keys, starting with soft, gentle notes that seemed to tell a story of longing and hope. The music moved slowly at first, careful and deliberate, drawing the listeners in, inviting them to lean closer and lose themselves in the sound. She remembered every lesson, every late night spent practicing alone, and poured those memories into her playing. Each note carried a piece of her life, a piece of her heart. The crowd began to notice the change in the music. It was not just a simple melody anymore. It was alive, flowing like a river that touched everything in its path. People who had been chatting or scrolling through their phones stopped. They turned their full attention to her, drawn by something they could not explain. There was an emotion in the music, a depth that made them feel connected in a way words never could. Her confidence grew with every note. She closed her eyes and let her hands find their own path on the keyboard. Memories of her childhood rushed back. Nights when she would sneak into her room with the old family piano and play until the moonlight faded. Music had been her escape, her friend, and now it was her voice. She let it speak for her, letting every note express feelings she had never dared to share with anyone. The restaurant felt smaller, somehow intimate, as if the walls had disappeared and it was just her and the music, and the people who were listening. The soft clinking of glasses, the occasional cough, and the hum of conversation had faded, replaced by the resonance of the piano. She felt a rhythm inside her, a heartbeat that matched the music, and with it, a freedom she had never experienced before. She began to add subtle flourishes, small improvisations that reflected her emotions. The melody grew richer, weaving through moments of light and shadow, happiness and sorrow. She could sense the audience leaning in, captivated by the story unfolding through her hands. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others exchanged glances, quietly amazed by the unexpected performance. A little boy in the corner watched her intently, his eyes wide with wonder. He had been fidgeting before, restless, but now he sat completely still, mesmerized by the sound. She could see the curiosity in his gaze, the way he tilted his head as if trying to understand the magic happening right in front of him. For a brief moment, it felt like the piano had the power to reach not just adults, but the hearts of children too. The waitress noticed an older couple at a nearby table, holding hands tightly, their eyes glistening. She realized that the music had touched something deep inside them, perhaps memories of their own lives, joys and sorrows intertwined. She felt a connection not just to the crowd as a whole, but to each person individually. Every note she played seemed to carry a message meant for them, and she played with that awareness, letting the music become a dialogue, a bridge between her and the strangers around her. The manager watched from a distance, astonished. He had seen many performers over the years, but nothing like this. He could sense the rare authenticity, the way the music seemed to come from her very soul. For a moment, he forgot about the orders, the busy schedule, and the problems of running the restaurant. He just stood there, quietly marveling at the scene unfolding before him. Encouraged by the reaction, she began to play more boldly, exploring the highs and lows of the piano, letting the dynamics shift naturally. There were moments of softness, almost whispers, that drew listeners in, and then bursts of energy that made hearts beat faster. She felt alive, more alive than she had ever felt behind a counter, balancing plates, or answering calls. In that moment, she understood the true power of music, how it could transform ordinary spaces into places of wonder and connection. Time seemed to lose meaning as she played. The lunch rush had long passed, but no one was leaving. Patrons were caught in the spell of the music, suspended in a rare and beautiful moment that felt like it belonged outside the usual constraints of daily life. She felt gratitude, a deep and unspoken joy, knowing that she had brought something meaningful to people who had come in for a meal but were leaving with an experience that would linger in their memories. Her fingers danced across the keys with more ease now, guided by instinct and emotion. She allowed herself to experiment, to explore notes she hadn't tried before, letting the piano lead her rather than forcing her hands to obey. There were moments of surprise for her as well, small discoveries that made her smile secretly. She realized that music was a living thing, and she was merely its vessel, channeling it into the room. She felt the energy of the crowd building subtly around her. There were no shouts or interruptions, only an intense, shared focus. She sensed the silent admiration and encouragement in the air, and it gave her a quiet confidence. Every person listening seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see where the music would take them next, and she was eager to show them. As she continued, her mind wandered to the idea that perhaps her life could change. She had always thought of music as a private joy, a secret she kept to herself, but now she realized its potential to touch others. She imagined herself performing more often, sharing her talent with the world outside the small restaurant. The thought was exciting, but she stayed grounded, focusing on the present moment, letting each note speak for itself. The song she played began to build toward its climax. She could feel the tension and release in the music, the way it demanded attention and then soothed it. Her hands moved with precision, yet with a gentle fluidity that made the melody feel natural and effortless. The crowd responded instinctively, leaning forward, letting themselves be carried by the story the piano told. In those final moments, she played with all her heart, fully immersed, without any thought for what might come next. The music was a gift she was giving, and in return, she felt a connection stronger than anything she had known. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the room was silent for a heartbeat, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, gradually, applause erupted, soft at first and then louder, filling the space with warmth and admiration. People were smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The energy in the room was electric, a mixture of joy, surprise, and gratitude. The waitress felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of pride and humility. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with love and awe. The manager came over, eyes wide, a smile spreading across his face. "That was incredible," he said again, almost repeating his earlier words but this time with more conviction. "I don't think anyone expected this. You've got a gift." She nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of shyness and satisfaction. She didn't need to say much. The music had spoken for her. Patrons approached her, offering compliments, some even sharing personal stories of how the music had touched them. She listened politely, grateful for their words, but still processing the wonder of what had just happened. As she stepped away from the piano for a brief moment, she felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in years. She realized that this was only the beginning, that the courage it took to sit at the piano had opened a door she could never close again. And even as she returned to her regular duties, carrying plates and taking orders, she carried with her a quiet confidence, a spark that promised more moments like this, where the ordinary could be transformed into something extraordinary with just a few notes of music. The restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, with the soft murmur of conversation and the gentle clinking of dishes filling the air. Yet, there was something different now. People who had been there earlier were still talking about the music, their eyes bright with excitement and awe. Even the regulars, who had seen every corner of the small restaurant many times over, seemed to notice a change. The energy in the room was warmer, richer, like the echoes of the piano had left a mark that could not be erased. She returned to her station, carrying a tray of drinks, but she felt a new lightness in her step. Her hands still tingled from playing, the sound lingering in her ears. For the first time, she felt that her life might be bigger than she had imagined. That simple act of sitting at the piano had opened a door, one that she could not ignore. People approached her between bites of food, complimenting her, asking about her music, and she smiled shyly, grateful but overwhelmed. It was strange to see strangers so genuinely interested in her passion. The manager called her over briefly, his eyes shining with pride. "That was extraordinary," he said. "I've worked in this restaurant for years, and I've never seen anything like it. You have a real gift and people noticed." She nodded, feeling a rush of warmth at his words. She had spent so long keeping this part of herself hidden, thinking no one would care or that it wasn't enough. And now, in just a few minutes, it had been acknowledged and appreciated. Throughout the afternoon, she found herself glancing at the piano whenever she had a spare moment. There was a pull she couldn't ignore, a desire to return to the instrument and continue the conversation she had started with the music. Every time she thought about the crowd's reaction, her heart swelled with pride, but also a quiet fear. Could she ever play like that again? Would it always feel this raw, this special? As the lunch crowd dispersed, a few people lingered by the piano, hesitant to leave. One older woman approached, her hands clasped tightly together. "You have no idea what that music did to me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It reminded me of my youth, of the piano my mother used to play. Thank you for sharing that." The waitress smiled, her heart lifting. She had never imagined her music could reach someone in such a personal way. Each story shared with her made the experience feel even more meaningful. The little boy from the corner earlier returned, holding a small notebook and a pencil. He shyly handed it to her, pointing to a page covered in scribbles. "I tried to write down the music you played," he said. She knelt down, examining his notes, amazed at the effort and care he had put into capturing the sound. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "You have a great memory for music. Keep practicing, and you'll be able to play anything you imagine." His smile was shy but proud, and she felt a warmth in her chest. She realized then that music had a ripple effect, reaching people far beyond herself, inspiring others in ways she could not always see. She spent the next few hours in a blend of work and reflection. Between taking orders and serving tables, she found moments to hum little pieces she had improvised earlier, letting the music linger in her mind. Each time she touched the piano, she felt more in control, more confident, and more connected to the room. She discovered a new sense of purpose, knowing that her talent was not just hers to hide, but a gift to share. As evening approached, the restaurant began to fill again. Dinner brought a different energy, more relaxed, but still buzzing with anticipation. People who had heard her play at lunch told friends and family, and now new customers were curious, eager to see if the stories were true. She felt a flutter of nervousness, but also excitement. She had never performed in front of a full room like this before, and the idea both scared and thrilled her. The piano stood silently in the corner, inviting her once more. She approached it carefully, aware of the eyes watching her. Her fingers hovered above the keys, the familiar tremble of nerves returning. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but then grew stronger, more confident, more alive. She could feel the crowd leaning in, waiting, listening, and she let herself be carried by the music. This time, she played with a different energy. She experimented more, adding small flourishes and variations, improvising pieces she had never played before. The room seemed to hold its breath, caught in the magic of the moment. Conversations ceased, phones were put down, and for a brief time, the restaurant became a place where only the music existed. She was not just a waitress anymore. She was a storyteller, using her hands and the piano to communicate emotions that words could not capture. People reacted in ways she had not anticipated. Some smiled softly, lost in memories the music had stirred. Others seemed to hold back tears, moved by the depth of feeling she conveyed. The little boy watched intently, and even the older couple at a nearby table held hands tightly, visibly touched. The manager, standing at the back, shook his head in disbelief and admiration. He had seen many performers, but none with the raw authenticity and emotional depth she brought to each note. As she continued, she noticed the subtle interactions between the patrons. Strangers exchanged glances, sharing a moment of quiet wonder. Friends leaned toward each other, whispering words of amazement. Some were simply still, absorbing the music in silence. She realized that her playing had created a sense of community, a shared experience that connected people in the room in ways she had never imagined. It was a powerful reminder that art, even in small moments, could transform ordinary spaces into something extraordinary. The music grew more intense, yet still gentle, weaving stories of joy, longing, and hope. She let herself be fully immersed, allowing the emotions she had held inside for so long to flow freely. Each note was a reflection of her journey, of the struggles and triumphs, the quiet moments of solitude, and the secret dreams she had nurtured for years. She felt alive in a way that nothing else in her life had given her, a sense of fulfillment and connection that went beyond words. As the final notes lingered in the air, she lifted her hands from the keys, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The silence that followed was almost reverent, the crowd savoring the last echoes of the music. Then, gradually, applause erupted, soft at first and then growing louder, filling the restaurant with warmth and admiration. Patrons cheered, some whistled, others clapped enthusiastically, and a few even wiped tears from their eyes. She smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude and humility. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with love. The manager approached her again, his eyes wide with pride and amazement. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "That was beyond anything I could have imagined. People are talking about it everywhere." She shook her head, a quiet smile on her lips. She didn't need to be thanked. The joy she felt from sharing her music and seeing its effect on others was reward enough. It was a moment she would carry with her forever. As the evening went on, she returned to her regular duties, but something inside her had shifted. She moved with a new confidence, a sense of purpose and pride in herself and her abilities. Every glance at the piano reminded her of what she had discovered, that courage, even in small acts, could open doors to experiences she had never dreamed possible. She had taken a chance, and it had led to something remarkable, something that would change the way she saw herself and the world around her. By the end of the night, the restaurant had emptied, but the energy of the day lingered in the air. She stood for a moment in front of the piano, gently pressing a few keys, letting the music drift softly through the empty room. It was a quiet, personal moment, a time for reflection and gratitude. She realized that this was only the beginning, that the piano and her music would continue to be a part of her journey, opening doors and touching lives in ways she had never imagined. And for the first time, she felt certain that she was ready to embrace it fully, with courage, passion, and an open heart. The next morning, the restaurant was quiet, a gentle calm after the excitement of the previous day. She arrived early, carrying her usual bag and apron, ready to begin her shift. As she entered, she noticed the subtle changes around her. The regulars greeted her with warm smiles, their eyes carrying a newfound respect. It was as if the music she had shared had left an invisible thread, connecting her to everyone in the room. She moved through the restaurant, taking orders and serving tables as usual, but now there was a lightness in her step. The memory of the applause and the faces of the people touched by her music lingered in her mind, filling her with confidence. Even the staff seemed to treat her differently, offering small nods of acknowledgement and admiration. The manager, in particular, had a proud look in his eyes, as if he had discovered something precious hidden in plain sight. By mid-morning, she had a moment alone with the piano. She approached it quietly, brushing her fingers over the keys. The instrument felt alive, welcoming her back. She pressed a soft note, then another, letting the sound fill the empty restaurant. It was a private moment, a gentle reminder of her own strength and talent. She played for herself first, experimenting with melodies she had never shared, exploring the depths of her creativity. The door opened, and a few early customers stepped in, pausing as they noticed her playing. They watched in awe, captivated by the grace with which she moved her hands over the keys. She smiled at them, a small, shy gesture, but it spoke volumes. Music had a way of breaking barriers, creating connections that words could not. Even without realizing it, she was building a bond with everyone who heard her, drawing them into a shared experience that felt intimate and profound. Throughout the day, the restaurant filled with a steady stream of patrons, each carrying a quiet anticipation. Word had spread quickly about the young waitress who played the piano so beautifully. Some came specifically to hear her, others were curious after hearing stories from friends or reading brief mentions online. Each time she sat at the piano, she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, a thrill that reminded her why she loved music so deeply. When she began to play again, the restaurant seemed to pause. Conversations softened, the clatter of dishes faded, and all eyes turned toward her. She let the music flow naturally, guiding her fingers as if they had a mind of their own. Every note told a story, every chord carried emotion. She played with the confidence she had gained from the previous day, yet each time was new, each performance a fresh expression of her soul. Customers reacted in ways that moved her deeply. Some closed their eyes, letting the melodies awaken memories long forgotten. Others smiled and nodded, appreciating the complexity and beauty of her improvisations. A young couple whispered to each other, their hands intertwined, as if the music had made the moment more special. Even the manager, usually so focused on keeping the restaurant running smoothly, paused to listen, a proud smile on his face. During a quiet moment, an older man approached her, his hands trembling slightly. "I couldn't leave without telling you how much your music touched me," he said. "It reminded me of my youth, of the piano my father played. Thank you for sharing your gift." She nodded, a lump forming in her throat. It was moments like this that made all the long hours of practice and secrecy worthwhile. She realized that her music was not just an expression of herself, but a bridge to others, a way to touch lives in ways she had never imagined. Later in the afternoon, a small group of children entered the restaurant, drawn by the sound of the piano. They gathered around, eyes wide, completely captivated. She smiled and began to play a cheerful, playful tune, her fingers dancing across the keys. The children giggled and clapped along, their joy contagious. She felt a warm sense of happiness, knowing that she was inspiring a love for music even in the youngest listeners. The day passed in a blur of music, laughter, and shared moments. She played several times, each performance unique, guided by the mood of the room and her own emotions. Patrons lingered longer than usual, savoring not just the food, but the experience of being part of something magical. She noticed people taking photos and sharing videos, the story spreading even further. Her quiet talent had become a source of inspiration, a reminder of the unexpected beauty that could appear in ordinary places. By evening, the restaurant was filled to capacity, and the energy was palpable. She sat at the piano once more, her fingers poised above the keys. This time, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She played with intention, letting the music tell a story of hope, resilience, and joy. The crowd responded immediately, leaning in, captivated by the emotion and passion in her performance. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy she was creating, a shared connection that transcended words. As the music reached its climax, she felt a rush of exhilaration. The notes flowed effortlessly, each one carrying the weight of her experience, her dreams, and her fears. The audience was completely absorbed, caught in the spell of the performance. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she was giving something meaningful, something that would stay with people long after they left the restaurant. When the final notes faded into silence, the crowd erupted into applause. Cheers and claps filled the room, some people even standing to show their appreciation. Tears glistened in a few eyes, smiles were wide, and the energy was electric. She felt a mix of pride, gratitude, and humility. This was more than she had ever dreamed, and it was all happening because she had taken a small chance, sitting at the piano and trusting herself. The manager approached again, his face glowing with admiration. "I can't thank you enough," he said. "You've changed the atmosphere of this place completely. People are talking about it everywhere. You're truly remarkable." She shook her head, smiling softly. Words were not enough to express what she felt. The music had done the talking, bridging gaps and creating connections she could never have imagined. As the night wore on and the restaurant emptied, she sat alone at the piano, letting her fingers move gently across the keys. It was a private moment of reflection, a time to absorb the experiences of the day and the joy she had brought to others. She realized that her life had shifted in a profound way. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a key to her own courage, a source of confidence, and a bridge to the hearts of those around her. She understood now that her talent was not something to be hidden, not something to keep secret. It was a gift meant to be shared, a way to touch lives and create moments of wonder. The applause, the smiles, the tears, the gratitude she received. They were all proof that taking a chance, embracing who she truly was, could change not only her life but the lives of others. As she closed the piano and walked toward the door, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more opportunities to play, to inspire, and to connect. Her journey had just begun, and she was ready to embrace it with all the courage and passion she had inside. The restaurant, once just a place of work, had become a stage, a canvas for her talent, and a place where her dreams could begin to unfold. The next morning, she arrived at the restaurant with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Word of her piano playing had spread beyond the usual crowd, and she knew there would be people eager to hear her again. She took a deep breath as she stepped inside, the familiar smell of coffee and baked goods greeting her. The piano in the corner seemed to shine more brightly today, as if it too knew that something special was about to happen. As she began her shift, she noticed new faces among the regulars. People had come specifically to see the waitress who could play the piano so beautifully. Some had even traveled from nearby towns, curious to witness the performance they had heard about. She felt a mixture of pride and responsibility, knowing that her music had touched so many lives, and that the expectations were high. She carried herself with quiet confidence, ready to face the day and embrace whatever came next. By mid-morning, a lull in the customers allowed her a moment with the piano. She approached it, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. Memories of the first time she had played in front of a crowd flooded her mind. The nervousness, the thrill, and the unexpected joy of connecting with people through music returned vividly. She pressed the first note, soft and deliberate, letting the sound resonate throughout the restaurant. It was a gentle beginning, a quiet conversation with the room. As she played, she noticed the reactions of those present. Some leaned forward, completely absorbed in the music. Others closed their eyes, letting the melodies evoke memories and emotions long forgotten. She realized that her playing was no longer just about expressing herself. It had become a shared experience, a bridge that connected everyone in the room. Each note carried a piece of her story, and in return, the audience offered their own, through smiles, tears, and silent appreciation. The manager, ever watchful, nodded encouragingly from the back of the room. He had seen her talent blossom over the past days, and he understood that she was more than just a waitress now. She had become the heart of the restaurant, bringing a unique warmth and energy that made every visit memorable. His quiet support gave her additional confidence, allowing her to explore new melodies and improvise more freely than before. Throughout the day, the restaurant filled with patrons eager to hear her play. She moved between her duties and the piano seamlessly, a balance she had learned quickly. Each time she sat at the keys, she felt a surge of anticipation and excitement. She experimented with new tunes, combining gentle, flowing melodies with unexpected harmonies, creating a sound that was entirely her own. The audience responded instinctively, drawn in by the authenticity and emotion of her performance. A group of students entered, their eyes wide with curiosity. They had heard about her talent through social media and were eager to witness it firsthand. She smiled and began to play a lively, uplifting piece, her fingers dancing over the keys. The students clapped along, their energy infectious. She felt a surge of joy, realizing that her music could inspire and bring happiness to people of all ages. It was a powerful reminder of the impact one person could have when they shared their passion. As the day progressed, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the countless hours spent practicing in secret, the moments of doubt and fear, and the small victories that had built her confidence. All of it had led to this point, where she could share her music openly and be recognized for her talent. The applause, the smiles, and the words of gratitude from patrons were a testament to the power of perseverance and courage. By evening, the restaurant was buzzing with anticipation. People who had heard her play earlier in the day returned with friends and family, eager to experience it again. She sat at the piano, feeling a calm confidence that contrasted with the nervousness she had felt initially. She allowed herself to be guided by the music, letting her emotions shape each note and chord. The room seemed to hold its breath, fully immersed in the melodies she created. As she played, she noticed the subtle interactions among the audience. Strangers shared glances and smiles, friends exchanged whispers of admiration, and children moved in rhythm with the music. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a medium through which connections were formed and emotions were shared. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she was creating moments that would be remembered long after the final note had faded. The music grew in intensity and complexity, weaving together themes of hope, resilience, and joy. She allowed herself to be fully present, letting the piano become an extension of her emotions. Each performance was unique, a reflection of her state of mind and the energy of the room. She noticed the audience responding instinctively, swaying, tapping their feet, and leaning closer to absorb every note. It was a dynamic, living interaction that fueled her performance and deepened her connection with the listeners. When the final notes lingered and faded, the room erupted into applause. It was a sound that filled every corner of the restaurant, warm and genuine. Some people cheered, others clapped enthusiastically, and a few even wiped tears from their eyes. She smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and pride. The journey from a shy waitress playing in secret to a musician who could touch hearts through her talent had been long, but the reward was immeasurable. The manager approached, his face glowing with admiration. "You've done something remarkable here," he said. "People will be talking about this for a long time. You've changed not just the restaurant, but everyone who hears your music." She nodded quietly, feeling the truth of his words. She didn't need to seek recognition. The connection, the joy, and the shared experience were more than enough. Her music had found its audience, and in doing so, it had transformed her life. As the night drew to a close, she remained at the piano for a few quiet moments, playing softly for herself. The restaurant was empty now, but the echoes of the day lingered in the walls, in the chairs, in the memories of everyone who had been there. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had embraced her passion fully and courageously. The piano had become a symbol of her journey, a testament to the power of following one's dreams and sharing one's gifts. Walking home that night, she reflected on the incredible turn her life had taken. From a quiet, reserved waitress to someone who could inspire and move people through her music, the transformation was profound. She understood that her talent was a gift, and that by sharing it, she had created ripples that would continue far beyond the walls of the small restaurant. Each note played had been a step toward self-discovery, courage, and connection. She realized that the journey was just beginning. There would be more performances, more moments of connection, and more opportunities to share her music with the world. The experience had taught her that sometimes, all it takes is a single moment of bravery to open doors to a life filled with purpose and joy. The piano, once a quiet corner of a restaurant, had become the center of her story, a place where she could express herself fully and touch the lives of others in ways she had never imagined.